Well, I'm very pleased to have on this episode of Speaking of Data, David Stodder, Senior Director of Research for Business Intelligence at TDWI. As an analyst, writer, and researcher, Dave has provided thought leadership on key topics in BI, analytics, IT, and information management for over two decades. Previously, he headed up his own independent firm and served as Vice President and Research Director with Ventana Research. He was the founding Chief Editor of Intelligent Enterprise and served as Editorial Director there for 9 years. And with TDWI Research, Dave focuses on providing research-based insight and best practices for organizations implementing BI, analytics, performance management, and related technologies and methods. Please welcome Dave Stodder. Very happy to have you here, Dave.
Great to be here, Andrew. Great to be with everyone. Thank you.
Terrific. The topic for today's podcast is how to get the most out of enterprise data catalogs. I think a great place to start with this conversation would be first, what is an enterprise data catalog and how prevalent are they in data architectures today?
Well, for one thing, for people who have hair of my color, they're not terribly new. In some ways, data catalogs have been around for a long time. They kind of date back to the days of data dictionaries that were in database systems. And I think kind of coming out of that, well, to sort of give an idea of what they address, like a data dictionary, it would collect together descriptions of the data objects you have, the schemas, the models, everything that's known about the data. So anyway, it would sort of build on that. So a catalog contains a lot of that kind of information based on metadata, of course, data about the data, sort of knowledge. Broadly, it's really sort of knowledge about the data. What do you know about the data? How is it created? How is it organized? How is it classified? How is it defined? That's kind of the most important thing in some ways. How is it being shared? And so it kind of builds off of a very primitive sort of file system of and some organizations, frankly, just use spreadsheets. That's their first data catalog is a spreadsheet or a simple desktop database. Just like, what do we have? Let's try to keep track of it. And so a data catalog kind of builds on that idea and tries to make it more sophisticated, so you can put more types of information in it. I mean, organizations today have lots of different kinds of data, lots of different kinds of content. So we're not just talking about structured data, but unstructured, semi-structured data. I mean, it's just becoming vast, as everyone knows, zettabytes of data. And so the challenge of trying to keep that all organized is mammoth. And so it's put a spotlight on this role of what is this, data catalog. We've kind of had these around for a while. And so they've been, the technology has been evolving. There's some tremendous, software companies out there that are devoted to it. And so just the basic ideas is, how is it organized? Where did it come from? Who owns it? So in other words, how it was created and by whom? And that's all kind of goes in the category of data lineage, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about. Rights to the data, who has rights to access the data, who has ownership rights, and we might talk about governance as well. So that becomes a big issue. And then just more and more how it's described, just the structure of the data, but also just what else do we know about the data? And so it starts to build on that into a real, very interesting and important knowledge base for organizations. So I hope that gives some degree of an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, it seems like with the tremendous amounts of data coming in, it would seem essential to have this within any system. So you maybe adding on to that, maybe a little bit more in depth, what are the objectives in having one of these? And in your estimation, are you seeing organizations are meeting those objectives?
Yeah. Before I get to that, I meant to give you some stats because from our research about how prevalent they are too. We actually have asked that question in a few years going back, and the last 2 years, in Q3 2022, so this is pretty recent research, 42% said they have a data catalog and 33% are planning to have one or use one.
Yeah.
So that's high, and it's higher than we had a year ago, which was, let's see, a year ago, 36% said they were planning to use one and 31% actually had one.
Okay.
So that's, some pretty good numbers coming up.
Yeah.
one thing to think about though is the enterprise issue. And a lot of organizations, as I mentioned, some organizations or some user groups or just project teams keep track of stuff like that in spreadsheets or simple databases. And so there's a lot of catalogs out there, and we found this in our research too, that in fact only 14% say that they cover all enterprise data, which, you think when an enterprise data catalog, you're talking about all the data. And but only 14% really have that. So most of the catalogs are actually, 18% use it for a single department or project, 21% for a single application or database. And so it's not to say these catalogs are not useful. They're incredibly useful. Anyway, so I think that's the thing. There's a variety. There's not one thing. Some are just used for a single platform, some for a single application. Say you have like a giant SAP system or something like that, or you might have a data lake, for example. You don't, who knows what's in the data lake? You don't have to be just a swamp. So the catalog can be very helpful for that. And then, so I think organizations are trying to build towards the enterprise idea, but aren't quite there yet. So let's see if I can roll back to your question you were asking about, what are some of the key objectives of having one? And so, kind of along those lines is that users spend a lot of time trying to figure out where the data is, what data they have, can they find it? And particularly if it's in these different platforms and different databases and different applications. And so again, we see in our research that that's something that's happening a lot, is they're just spending so much time just trying to find this data, which means they have less time to do the actual analytics or actually sharing insights with others that are really important to the business. And so that's a big mission, is just to make it easier to find it. And so you need kind of an inventory. And so often the first step for a catalog is just to get an inventory of the data, like where is it, what do we have? And then of course that rolls into kind of the governance priorities, which I think maybe we'll talk a little bit more about in detail, but you can imagine, you have to know where the data is and what the data is. So that's part of it, just getting the inventory, and then improving the visibility of where it is can really speed up a lot of data curation, data preparation, and data integration processes. So, if users are trying to collect and ingest this data, and then they're trying to figure out what do we need to do to transform the data and enrich the data to make it fit for purpose, it'd be great if you had a catalog that could help you formulate all your what you need to do there to prepare the data. And the whole process of curation is, a lot of people use that expression now. So you're curating the data from its raw form to the fit for purpose form. So that could go through a lot of enrichment and transformation, cleansing, and things like that. And so the catalog can help you, locate the data and then keep track of the data during all of those processes, and then improve reuse, because a lot of organizations, that's another thing that takes a lot of time, is nobody knows that there actually could be a data set that's in perfectly good condition, ready to go. So they end up taking time to create a new one. And so a catalog can shorten that process too. The part of the knowledge about the data that can be contained in a lot of modern data catalogs can be about these data sets, or maybe about even a transformation, an ETL routine, something that other user groups are working with that could be reused. So anyway, so those are some of the things that are important. So yeah, streamlining curation and preparation, those kinds of things. Another is trying to form this idea of the semantic layer. And of course, that's another thing that's kind of been around for a while. Business intelligence systems have had sort of semantic layers that are important for putting together calculations, and again, the data definitions and what the users are working with, so that it's not just a total confusion, and like, again, not having any reuse and that kind of thing. So the idea of the semantic layer, the catalog obviously would play a very important role in that. And it expands out to really kind of connecting what the business idea of the data is to what the data is, and of course where the data is located. And so connecting those higher level business definitions, say of customers or products or partners or anything else that the organization's interested in, with the data itself. And so the catalog plays a big role in that. And then again, that kind of expanding knowledge base and talking about beyond just kind of technical or very basic metadata to more like, how does this fit into our understanding of customers or markets or things like that? And how can we relate all of this data together? And so there's a lot more advanced technologies that are being thrown at that right now, but there's also master data management. So connecting the catalog with MDM or product information management, PIM, or these other multi-domain MDM is very important. Often in organizations, those are not, put together. Like MDM may have been kind of running a long time with some production applications. You've got these catalog kind of over more in the data and analytics and BI area. So it's important for organizations to think about how they can put that all together into this semantic layer kind of that's forming. So hopefully that gives you some thoughts there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you laid out those objectives. Do you see most organizations being able to meet those objectives?
We see sort of mixed results on that. Like, I've got some research again from the Q3 2022, and some of the priorities, like one is enabling users to make it easier to find and access. We asked, actually, satisfaction is pretty high for that. We had 20% was very satisfied, 38% somewhat satisfied, and then establishing a single location transparent resource for metadata, again, about the same numbers for satisfaction there. So I think what that tells us is that once organizations are on the way to developing catalog, it does improve satisfaction with some of these key areas. Some missions like to high technical complexity, particularly as you're democratizing in your organization, you have more types of users. That's really important. So can you hide the technical complexity of just trying to find the data and then be able to use the catalog itself? And so the results are a little bit more middling. Improving data quality, consistency, and completeness, the role for that, again, kind of in the middle, and governance. So these are some areas that could stand to be improved, that are definitely priorities in organizations. Again, improving data pipelines, we see 22% pretty dissatisfied, 35% somewhat or neither dissatisfied neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. So so room for improvement in some of these areas. Yep.
Certainly. So within an organization, who would be responsible for this enterprise data catalog?
Well, a key role is a data steward, and the data steward is in some ways the person, again, it could be, often organizations don't have a title of data steward. They might have in their project team or in their group. I mean, it's terrific. And we do actually see some organizations, a growing number of organizations having a data steward. Or it might be that chief data officer, or the data stewards might report into the chief data officer if they have it. So, but the data steward, their expertise is really the data. And so the data catalog obviously is very important to them because it contains a lot of this information that they need to know. And so data stewards, they oversee data quality processes, they manage metadata and master data often. They guide users to what data is fit for purpose, so they try to improve reuse. A lot of organizations struggle to find data stewards. And of course, if you assign a data steward, then what if that person leaves? Then all of a sudden
Right.
you're back to number one. And so one thing that a lot of modern enterprise data catalogs can do is help you look at the data, in some ways find out who could be a good data steward, because you're looking at data ownership and data sharing and who's setting up the data sets and things like that. And so you can kind of get an idea in a particular group who's got strong talents in those areas, who really knows the data. And so the chief data officer or other executives might approach those folks and say, how about being a data steward? So I think that's an important role too. So anyway, yes, I think a data steward and someone or in that role, and it could be data administrators, data analysts, business analysts. In a data science group, there often would be someone who may be a data engineer who takes on the role of a data steward. But those are some of the responsibilities, and we talk about that a lot at TDWI. So there'd be a lot of resources for folks to look at as to how to identify, how to line up, kind of the priorities for a data steward.
Terrific. Something you mentioned a couple times is data governance. And obviously that's a pretty key concern within the TDWI community and the community at large. How would a enterprise data catalog help with data governance?
Well, excuse me. Well, there's offensive and defensive data governance in a way. There's the offensive side is sometimes not as recognized. Actually, I keep talking about the defensive side first. That's to protect sensitive information like personally identifiable information about customers or information about the business and other kinds of sensitive information. And so again, knowing where that data is, how it's being shared, how it's being used, how they can prevent fraud and abuse of that kind of data, reduce risk, adhere to regulations. Data catalog plays a really important role. And I think, we've been talking about that a lot this past year at TDWI, data governance and the role of catalogs in that. And so I think as, people go out and look at the possible solutions and services out there, that's usually one of their top questions to ask. And but the offensive side is around the data quality and the curation, preparing the data. And so that kind of data governance catalog also plays, again, a key role in a lot of areas that I've mentioned. So I'd say that for organizations that are democratizing, that have lots of different sources of data and are running into data governance issues, the catalog is probably their number one resource, and they should be developing that.
I think moving into more specific environments that some of these organizations are working within, we know that many organizations have distributed data environments, including on-premises and cloud-based repositories and multi-cloud environments. What role would an enterprise data catalog play in those types of scenarios?
Well, I think, governance, picking up on the governance idea, really that in a distributed environment, governance is really difficult because you got data silos everywhere. The data is spread around. And so that is one of the real considerations in trying to knit together distributed data environments is being able to govern that entire environment. And so, again, a data catalog plays a role in containing information as you amass information about all the different resources, what's in this, frankly, in this data silo and that data silo. We've got data migrating to the cloud, what's in that data. So you want to have an inventory, particularly of the sensitive data that you're working with for governance purposes. And so it's important there. And if you look at data fabrics and data mesh kind of frameworks, governance and the role of metadata and having knowledge about the data is really critical. For virtualization, data virtualization uses metadata very heavily, for example. And so if you have a data virtualized environment where you're, again, you're accessing and querying lots of different multiple sources, but you don't want to move all that data, say, to a data warehouse, or you can't for some reason, particularly often for regulatory reasons, you might have data virtualization layer in place. Well, that data virtualization layer is using metadata heavily. And so there again, you have kind of this tandem of the virtualization and the catalog. And so that's building out into fabrics and data mesh, which often use virtualization concepts at least. You might have a logical data fabric, for example. And so there you need a really good data catalog and metadata repository to drive that. So yeah, I think that it's important, particularly as you start to try to knit together distributed environments, to have a good enterprise data catalog.
I think very helpful information there, Dave, but I think perhaps we might be able to take it one step further. You've mentioned a lot of, really good practices for those that are entertaining the idea of building a data catalog, enterprise data catalog, but perhaps you can give like an overarching view of some of the best practices that you might recommend for getting the most out of their enterprise data catalogs and even taking advantage of technology trends.
Sure. Well, one is I think looking for those data stewards that I was talking about, and again, the people that are in your project team, or it could be just your department, and then certainly at an enterprise level, if you have that capability, to spot those data stewards as the people who can know the most about the data in the group, and can work with the data catalog, and understand how the data is organized. And so that's a very important person. So I think doing that, and then certainly if you have a chief data officer, maybe having the data stewards report into the chief data officer, or it could be the chief data officer, that person, they are actually the ones who are driving it.
Mhm.
The other is, a lot of the knocks on data catalogs over the years is just taken so much time just to put them together and then to maintain them, that they often kind of fall into disuse, or they're kind of out of date. But modern technologies have really changed that. So there's a lot of automation, and often AI-driven automation. And we do see in our research that automation of catalogs is a high priority. 45% want to increase automation, reduce manual maintenance and development. So no question, that's a good idea, because it's sort of a thankless job sometimes. And but automation has really improved. A lot of it's sort of AI driven to improve scalability and speed and accuracy. And so definitely look at those aspects of the tools. I think that consolidation is a good idea. As I mentioned, like a lot of catalogs are departmental or on a platform or things like that. But as we talk again about distributed environments and organizations wanting to get the most value out of all of their data, if you can consolidate into an enterprise data catalog, that's a great thing. And so again, a lot of enterprise data catalogs have certainly moved to the cloud, so they're services now. So you don't necessarily have to have the on-premises resources for them. So that's a big advantage. And let's see, some other things I wanted to mention. I think that enhancing user interaction. So make it easy to search for the information,
Mhm.
use visualization where you can, make it, just the whole process seamless and faster. And again, a lot of tools out there are capable of doing that now. Enterprise data catalogs used to be sort of a wonky thing that only an administrator could use, but now they're getting much more user friendly, and so that opens it up to lots of different types of business users. You don't necessarily need to have everybody accessing the catalog. Often the catalog could be buried in another tool, like a BI tool or an application. But you want to be able to make it easy for users to work with it, even if it's embedded that way. Let's see. Just get another. We've done so much research on this, Andrew. I've got like tons of stuff, because catalogs, you can imagine, use them is very important. And I think, yeah, one of the things I mentioned is that semantic layer. So connecting to all the MDM or other kinds of tools that you might have out there that are filling that out, and using things like, knowledge graphs or knowledge, those kinds of systems to understand data relationships. And graph databases, for example, are now underlying some catalogs to improve just the recording and retaining that information, that knowledge about data relationships and the knowledge there. So that's important as well. So connected with those kinds of systems, so that it's easier to map the data to the business terms, in other words, which is often a challenge in organizations. So I think those are probably some of the key ones.
Fantastic. I think that's such useful information for our audience. Unfortunately, I think we have run out of time here. You're a busy man. I want to let you get back to all that research that we have you doing on a daily basis. But really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, Dave.
Sure thing. Great, Andrew. Great to be with you.